Well, one thing led to another after meeting Bill, and I'm not going to bore you with that story because you do want to have your open space sessions today as well. But what it led to was that 4 people, Bill Torbert, me, Jane Allen, and Irena Pranskevičiūtė from Lithuania, who met in a workshop in the UK 2014, then started to look at, well, what is it that we want to work with? What is it that we want to do? And what we did come up with is kind of the vision that we still have today, which is to double the worldwide leaders with transforming capacity. And it is actually in order to shift to a more conscious world where there is more aware and sustainable decisions. Because the decisions that we make, that's my belief, is those that matter. And we have chosen leaders, or maybe I was the initiator, the other came along. Because somehow I think that the most influential place is children. So if we do make a change for children, that's going to actually change a whole lot. But I do have 3 children. Maybe that's kind of enough for me. And I was more fluent in the leadership space, so I was deciding that that is the place where I want to impact. And I think that is something that I still have a belief in that we all have different places where we're fluent, and we need to choose where it is that we want to impact and what it is that we want to impact. And this is my and our arena, and it still actually sticks. Then we have, I'm going to go one bar back. So then it's looking at, well, what is conscious entrepreneurship? And for me, it is divided. I mean, there's probably a lot of definitions for it, but for me, it's kind of divided into 2 things. And one is that of like, what do we offer as a company or as an entrepreneur? And how is that actually creating something that we believe in? And for me, it's that of creating a future. I think you were talking about that. What is the future that we want to see? Whether that's the best possible or not, but it is from our view, coming with an intention to actually create something. And for me, it's building a world where I want to see my children and my grandchildren and maybe their children to actually grow up and go back to the kind of the ideas in many African native cultures where it's like you are to look 7 generations ahead with your decisions. So that's kind of a principle that we hold. The other part for me is that because it is about consciousness, and I do believe that the more we are in that space, we are to use ourselves as the vehicle for change. So we need to be the change and not only kind of talk about the change and give like, okay, here's the change, you know, I'm going to teach you about the change, but how does the way in which I show up, the way in which I make decisions, and the way in which I take my own development, actually. So the whole part of personal development, for me, is part of that conscious entrepreneurship. And I'm going to just jump over, this is the framework we kind of used, and rather talk about, you know, the struggles that I have seen in jumping off a career where I was a CEO and I had headhunters calling to jump into a industry that I had no experience, to be honest. I had no money, and I was just saying, bye, I'm going to quit and I'm going to do what I really love and have a dream about. Would I then have known that I would be 2 years without a salary? I don't know if I would actually taken that that decision. Afterwards, of course, there's no way I would have wanted to do it any other way. But there's a few things and a few kind of struggles that I've experienced in my journey. And if I start from the end, it's like what I was just talking about. It's kind of the disappointments that you might have, and I have had, because I have wanted to stay true to what we want to offer and stay true to that service that we want to do. Not go in and offer trainings, not go in and offer what the customer asks for, but actually what we believe truly the change and the transformation is about. And it is a much more difficult journey. And so there has been many disappointments on the way. And so the way in which we are to deal with the resilience, how do we get up on our feet? How do we say, okay, I'm knocked off, but I'm actually going to get up again. I'm going to comb my hair in the morning, and I'm going to go again and do over and over because I do believe in what I'm doing. The other part is the fear and the trust. And I can tell you that when I didn't have a salary for a long time, and I'm the only one bringing in money to our family. I have 3 teenage sons, and I didn't live in a cardboard box, so I kind of had something to actually pay over there. This was a real learning to me. It's like, well, that is a fear, and I can tell you as an adult, I go into those questions of like, am I really being a responsible person to not actually have an income when I have my children, and whether it's headhunters calling, and I could just say, well, I'm going to go and work and get the salary next month. So that it brings in fear. And I learned that when I actually stayed with the trust and trusting life, trust that, well, it looks really, really difficult, but I am going. I'm trusting that all is going to sort out. Well, it actually did. And so that was one of my really big both struggles and learnings. One is about confidence. So being in advertising for a long time, it's like, oh, I know these things, and go to the customer, you tell them this is how it's done, and that's how we do it. And then coming into a new way and something that hasn't much done before, it is nudging my confidence at least, maybe not yours, but it was nudging my confidence quite a bit. And that whole thing of very easily going into the story that I know nothing, I have nothing to offer, and that is not being a very good friend to yourself. So that whole thing of actually being very empathetic and being a friend to yourself is a part that I have had to go through. And then it's the part of development and mutual development. It is one of the values that we hold strongly within Amara, is actually giving feedback, receiving feedback, telling really like we call it tough love, because I do believe that actually feedback is always an act of love, because if I'm telling some kind of feedback, if it is in the service of helping the other person to develop, not to kind of criticize and put them down, it is an act of love. But it can be a really tough love. and so that is something we hold on to every meeting. We actually do give each other feedback, and we help each other in the development, internally and in the company. And the last thing that I wanted to share was kind of a few ironies that I've had. And one is let's start with the courage. And so a lot of people say, well, you're so brave and you have so much courage, and just doing that. And I'm like, well, there's a fine line in between courage and being a little bit mad about the stubborn. Like, when do you say, well, I actually did fail, and I'm not just going to be like, no, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get up and I'm going to be resilient. And that is one of the ironies that I'm dealing with. It's the part of good and bad. So in my ad agency days, at the end, I was like, well, I don't want to work with, those things that what I brought into this world, or I don't want to work with too many pharma companies. And so it's very easy to put, these are bad things and these are good things. But actually it is a matter of like, how do you come in and what do you do? And I think that this is one of the other ironies I've been working with. One is the seriousness. So I loved your meditation, because oftentimes there is somehow an unwritten story that I need to be very, very serious because I'm doing personal development and I'm going to grow and take all of the responsibility. Well, actually, we can bring in a lot of joy. We can be a lot more forgiving of ourselves of not being perfect, because we aren't, and that's the beauty of being a human. So oftentimes we're just not as kind as we could be to ourselves. And that comes to the next of the kindness and humility does bring us very far, I believe. And think about, I think almost all of us that's the first things we're taught as a children. You need to be kind. I was taught that. You need to be kind to other people. And then yet to really bring that kindness to ourselves and to others, and that being forgiving, I think it is a fundamental and not enough kind of used aspect of our own development. And then the last thing that I want to say, because I'm already over time, is about consciousness. And we often, I don't know, maybe that's my kind of biased story, it's about consciousness being something that is more coming with love, and it is a loving space, and we need to be very nice. But actually, consciousness, I do think, is about change and transformations. And often that comes with interventions. And I'm not saying interventions are always difficult. The interventions can also be like coming in with a very positive attitude. But the thing is that consciousness isn't necessarily always something that is, the good and the beautiful and the heart and the love, but it can be quite tough at times. And that is in the service of then a longer perspective and in the end, coming in with love. So I think I had a video, but I'm not going to show. That's me and Babe, Bill and Jane, who are kind of the founders of Amara. So I just want to kind of end this with saying that we cannot predict the future. Or what we can do is actually transform ourselves in order to better meet it and be equipped and shape the things that we want to see more of in the world. Thank you.